When trauma nurse Kemi Adeyemi stepped between armed men and a terrified Korean child in a Los Angeles alley, she thought she was just doing what anyone would do. But that split-second decision put her on the radar of Park Joon-ho, one of the most powerful and dangerous men in the city. What she didn't know was that the 7-year-old boy clinging to her was the heir to a criminal empire, and that saving him would pull her into a world of violence, loyalty, and impossible choices. As Kemi fell deeper in love with both the guarded father and his traumatized son, she had to decide. Could she accept the darkness in Joon-ho's past, or would loving him destroy everything she'd worked so hard to build? This is a story about courage, redemption, and the dangerous power of love that crosses every line. If you're ready for a tale that will grip your heart and refuse to let go, keep watching. Welcome to Afro-Korean TV. If you're already captivated, smash that notification bell because this story is about to spiral into dangerous obsession. The sound of breaking glass shattered the midnight quiet like a gunshot. Kemi Adeyemi's aching feet had carried her halfway through the shortcut between the hospital and her apartment when the noise made her freeze. After 16 hours in the trauma unit at Cedars-Sinai, every instinct screamed at her to keep walking. Her navy blue scrubs were stained with blood and betadine. Her natural hair was pulled back in a frizzy bun that had given up hours ago. She was exhausted, underpaid, and in no mood for heroics. But then she heard the child's cry, high, terrified, and distinctly desperate. "No, let me go, Appa." Kemi's body moved before her brain could protest. She rounded the corner into the alley and her heart stopped. Two massive men in dark clothing had a small Korean boy cornered against a dumpster. The child couldn't have been more than 7, his school uniform torn, his face streaked with tears. One of the men was reaching for him with hands that promised violence. "Hey," Kemi's voice rang out with the authority of someone who'd spent years commanding emergency rooms. "Get away from him, now." The men turned, surprise flickering across their faces. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the taller one laughed, a sound that made Kemi's blood run cold. "Walk away, lady. This doesn't concern you." A child being hurt concerns everyone. Kemi pulled out her phone, fingers hovering over 911. "Last chance. Walk away or I call the cops." The shorter man's hand moved toward his jacket, and Kemi saw the flash of metal, a gun. Her mouth went dry, but she didn't back down. Instead, she did the most reckless thing she'd ever done in her 28 years of life. She stepped directly between the armed men and the child. "Run," she whispered to the boy in the calmest voice she could manage, never taking her eyes off the men. "Run as fast as you can and scream for help." The boy hesitated for only a second before darting past her. The shorter man lunged to grab him, but Kemi blocked his path, and suddenly rough hands were shoving her against the brick wall. Pain exploded across her shoulder blade. The taller man's face was inches from hers, his breath hot and rank. "You just made a very stupid mistake." But before he could do anything else, the alley flooded with headlights, bright, blinding, and accompanied by the screech of tires. A black Range Rover had blocked the alley's entrance, and more vehicles were pulling up behind it. The two men released Kemi immediately, their confidence evaporating. They exchanged a glance that spoke volumes, then took off running deeper into the alley, disappearing over a chain-link fence with surprising agility. Kemi slumped against the wall, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst. The Range Rover's door opened, and a man emerged, tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, moving with the fluid grace of a predator. Park Joon-ho had been in a meeting with his accountants when the call came through. "Boss, we've lost the kid." Someone grabbed him outside the academy. The world had tilted on its axis in that moment. His son, his everything was gone. For 10 minutes, Joon-ho had lived in a special kind of hell that only parents know, the kind where every worst-case scenario plays out in vivid, horrifying detail. Now, as his eyes swept the alley with tactical precision, he saw his son first. Ji-hoon was pressed against the wall 20 feet away, tears streaming down his face, but alive. Alive. And standing between where his son had been and where the attackers had fled was a woman in scrubs, breathing hard, her shoulder bleeding where she'd been slammed against the brick. Jihuna, Joon-ho's voice cracked with relief as he strode toward his son. The little boy launched himself into his father's arms, sobbing in rapid Korean. "Appa, the bad men tried to take me, but the lady saved me. She was so brave. She stood in front of me like a warrior." Joon-ho's arms tightened around his son as his gaze shifted to the woman who'd apparently played warrior. She was beautiful in an understated way, rich brown skin that seemed to glow even in the harsh alley lighting, intelligent dark eyes that held both fear and defiance, and a natural elegance despite her disheveled appearance. There was something about the set of her shoulders, the way she held herself even while clearly terrified, that spoke of deep inner strength. "You saved my son," he said, his Korean accent wrapping around the English words carefully. "You put yourself between him and armed men." Kemi finally caught her breath enough to respond. Anyone would have done the same. "No," Joon-ho's voice was firm. "They wouldn't have. Most people would have called the police from a safe distance. You chose to become a human shield." He studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Why?" "Because he's a child," Kemi said simply, as if that explained everything. Maybe it did. Behind Joon-ho, more men had emerged from the vehicles, 6 of them, all moving with military precision, all clearly armed. They fanned out into the alley, speaking into earpieces, securing the perimeter. The whole scene had the choreographed efficiency of a special ops mission, not a concerned parent picking up their kid. Kemi's nurse instincts kicked in as she noticed the boy's torn uniform and scraped hands. "Is he hurt? I should check him over. I'm a trauma nurse at Cedars." "You're hurt," Joon-ho observed, nodding toward her bleeding shoulder. "Di-young, bring the first aid kit." One of the suited men immediately moved to comply. Kemi wanted to protest that she was fine, but the adrenaline was wearing off, and her shoulder was starting to throb with a vengeance. "I'm okay, really. I just want to make sure he's—" "Please," Joon-ho's voice softened. "Let me take care of you. You risked your life for my son. It's the least I can do." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Someone must have called 911. Joon-ho's expression flickered with something Kemi couldn't quite read before his mask of composure settled back into place. "The police will want your statement," he said. "But first, may I know your name?" Kemi Adeyemi." "Kemi," he repeated, and something about the way he said it made her name sound like something precious. "I'm Park Joon-ho. This is my son Jihoon." He paused, then made a decision that would change everything. "May I have your number? I'd like to properly thank you once things settle down. Dinner, perhaps, you and anyone you'd like to bring." Kemi hesitated. Every warning bell in her head was ringing. The expensive cars, the small army of security, the way even the approaching police officers seemed to recognize and defer to this man, none of it spoke of a simple concerned parent. But then Jihoon looked up at her with huge, grateful eyes and said in careful English, "Please come, angel lady. Appa makes the best kimchi jjigae. Well, our cook does, but still." Despite everything, Kemi laughed. "All right, one dinner." As she recited her number and Joon-ho entered it into his phone, with the care of someone handling something valuable, Kemi couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just stepped off a cliff. She didn't see the way Joon-ho's expression went glacial as he turned to his head of security, didn't hear the rapid Korean as he gave orders that would ensure tonight's attackers regretted ever being born. But she felt his eyes on her as the paramedics checked her over, felt the weight of his gaze as police officers took her statement, felt the strange pull of connection that had formed in those terrifying moments when she'd chosen a stranger's child over her own safety. "Appa," Jihoon whispered in Korean, tugging his father's sleeve. "I like her. She smells like flowers and courage." Joon-ho looked down at his son, the only person in the world who made him feel human, and made a decision that terrified and exhilarated him in equal measure. "So do I, Jihoon, so do I." As Kemi finally headed home 3 hours later, escorted by one of Joon-ho's security team just to be safe, she touched the bandage on her shoulder and wondered what she'd gotten herself into. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Thank you for giving me back my world. I'll pick you up at 7 tomorrow, JH. Kemi stared at the message, her heart doing complicated things in her chest. She should say no, should recognize all the red flags waving frantically in her peripheral vision, should stick to her safe, predictable life. Instead, she texted back, I'll be ready. 2. Kemi stared at her reflection in the mirror of her small bathroom, second-guessing everything. The burgundy-wrapped dress she'd chosen felt simultaneously too dressy and not dressy enough. She'd spent 40 minutes on her hair, finally settling on a twist-out that framed her face in soft curls. 3 times she'd changed her jewelry. Twice she'd redone her makeup. You're nervous, observed her roommate, Tandu, leaning against the doorframe with a knowing smirk. At 32, Tandu Chen was a public defender with the sharp instincts of someone who'd spent years reading people in courtrooms. It's just dinner, Kemi said, applying lip gloss with more focus than necessary. A thank you dinner. And this man who's picking you up for this, just dinner, what do you actually know about him? He's Korean, he has a 7-year-old son, he's grateful I helped his child. Kemi met Tandu's eyes in the mirror. That's all I need to know for one meal. Girl, a man who can afford to take you to Kochi on a Tuesday isn't just anybody. Tandu crossed her arms. And from what you described, the security, the cars, the way the cops acted around him, he's definitely not just a regular businessman. Before Kemi could respond, her phone buzzed. I'm here, JH. Kemi grabbed her purse and kissed Tandu's cheek. Don't wait up. I always wait up. It's what concerned friends do. Kemi stepped out of her modest apartment building in Koreatown and stopped short. Joon-ho stood beside a sleek black Mercedes that looked like it cost more than she'd make in 5 years, looking like he'd stepped out of a Korean drama. His navy suit was perfectly tailored, his hair styled with casual precision, and when he smiled at her, Kemi felt her breath catch. You look beautiful, he said, opening the passenger door with old-world courtesy. Thank you, she slid into the car, immediately overwhelmed by the luxury. The leather seats were butter-soft, the dashboard looked like something from a sci-fi movie, and the subtle scent of expensive cologne made her head spin. How's Jihoon today? She asked as Joon-ho pulled smoothly into traffic. Better, he slept through the night without nightmares for the first time in months. Joon-ho glanced at her, and something warm flickered in his dark eyes. He's been asking about you constantly, wanted to know when the angel lady was coming back. I'm not an angel, Kemi said with a soft laugh. I'm just someone who couldn't walk away from a child in danger. That's precisely what makes you one. His voice held a weight of sincerity that made her chest tighten. The restaurant was everything Kemi expected, and more intimate lighting, impeccable service, and a hushed elegance that spoke of serious money. But what surprised her was how easy it was to talk to Joon-ho. He asked thoughtful questions about her work, listened intently to her stories about her patients, and shared carefully edited tales about raising Jihoon as a single father. His mother, Kemi asked gently when Joon-ho mentioned Jihoon's nightmares. Car accident 3 years ago. The pain in his voice was raw and real. Jihoon was only 4, he was in the car with her. Oh, Joon-ho, Kemi reached across the table, touching his hand briefly. I'm so sorry. The simple gesture nearly undid him. When was the last time someone had touched him with genuine compassion? When had anyone offered him sympathy without wanting something in return? He's been in therapy, but nothing seemed to help. Until yesterday, you were the first person he's truly trusted since my young died. Children have good instincts about people, Kemi said softly, and he's clearly a special little boy. He's everything good about me and nothing bad. Something in his tone made Kemi study his face more carefully. What do you do for work, Joon-ho? The question he'd been dreading, import-export, business connections between Korea and the US. It wasn't technically a lie. He did facilitate the movement of goods across borders, just not the legal kind. But the genuine interest in her eyes made guilt twist in his stomach. That sounds fascinating. Do you travel much? I used to, but since my young died, I try to stay close to home for Ji-hoon." As the evening progressed, Kemi found herself drawn deeper into Joon-ho's orbit. He was intelligent, surprisingly funny in a dry way that caught her off guard, and clearly devoted to his son. But there were moments when his phone buzzed and his expression went cold, when he excused himself to take a call, and she heard his voice turn sharp through the closed door, when his eyes swept the restaurant like he was cataloging exits, that reminded her there were depths to this man she couldn't fathom. "I should get you home," he said as they finished dessert. "You mentioned an early shift tomorrow." In the car, the tension between them was palpable. When Joon-ho walked her to her door, Kemi turned to thank him and found herself much closer than she'd intended. "Thank you for dinner, it was wonderful. Thank you for saving my son." His voice was rougher now, his dark eyes intense. "And for reminding me that there are still genuinely good people in the world." For a moment, Kemi thought he might kiss her. Part of her wanted him to, but instead he stepped back, his iron control firmly in place. "Can I see you again?" he asked. "I'd like that." As she watched his car disappear into the night, Kemi touched her lips, wondering what it would have felt like to kiss Park Joon-ho. What she didn't know was that 2 blocks away, Joon-ho sat gripping the steering wheel, fighting every instinct to turn around. He'd built his empire on control, on keeping emotions locked away where they couldn't be used against him. But one evening, with Kemi Adeyemi, had shattered his carefully constructed walls. His phone rang. "Boss, we found the men who tried to grab the kid. What do you want us to do with them?" Joon-ho's voice turned to ice. "Make sure they understand that touching my family has consequences, permanent ones." As he drove toward the industrial district, Joon-ho tried to reconcile the man who just shared dessert with a beautiful nurse, and the man who was about to ensure 2 kidnappers never threatened anyone again. Some lines couldn't be uncrossed, but for the first time in years, he wondered if some lines were worth crossing anyway. 4 weeks later, Kemi was falling in love, and it terrified her. It had started innocently enough, coffee dates between her shifts, lunches in the hospital cafeteria, when Joon-ho would stop by with Ji-hoon for checkups that weren't medically necessary at all. The little boy had attached himself to her with the fierce devotion only children could manage, and watching Joon-ho with his son had melted every defense Kemi had tried to maintain. "You're glowing," her colleague Dr. Rachel Park observed as they reviewed patient charts. "Please tell me this is about that gorgeous man who's been bringing you artisan coffee every morning." "His name is Joon-ho. He's a businessman and he's—" Kemi paused, searching for words. "Complicated. Good complicated, or run for the hills complicated." Before Kemi could answer, her phone buzzed. "Emergency at work. Can you pick up Ji-hoon from school? I'll explain later. JH." "I have to go," Kemi told Rachel, already grabbing her bag. "Cover for me." 20 minutes later, she stood outside Pacific Academy, an exclusive private school that probably cost more than her annual salary. When Ji-hoon spotted her, his face lit up like sunrise. Kemi noona, he'd started calling her that, the Korean term of endearment for an older female friend. "Did Appa send you?" "He did, sweetheart. He had a work emergency." Ji-hoon chatted excitedly as they walked to her modest Honda Civic, telling her about his day, his friends, his science project. It wasn't until they were driving that he grew quiet. "Noona, are you going to be my new eomma?" Kemi's heart clenched. "Oh honey, your Appa and I are just friends." "But you make him smile. He doesn't smile for anyone else." Ji-hoon's voice was small. "And you make the nightmares go away." "I do. When I think about you being there, the scary dreams don't come. Appa says you're magic." Kemi pulled into the parking garage of Joon-ho's building, a gleaming high-rise in downtown LA that screamed wealth and power. The security guard knew Ji-hoon by name and directed them to a private elevator that required both a key card and a fingerprint scan. "Penthouse," Ji-hoon announced proudly as they rode up. "We have the whole top floor." The elevator opened directly into Joon-ho's apartment, and Kemi's breath caught. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Los Angeles, The decor was minimalist perfection, all clean lines and expensive taste. This wasn't just wealth, this was serious money. Wow, she breathed. Appa says our old house in Seoul was bigger, but I like it here because it's just us. Jihoon led her to the kitchen, where he immediately began preparing a snack with the efficiency of a child used to taking care of himself. As Kemi watched him, questions multiplied in her mind. What kind of import-export business afforded this lifestyle? Why did a 7-year-old know how to work a security system that looked military-grade? And why did every surface in this beautiful home feel cold despite the warm touches clearly added for Jihoon? I'm home, Joon-ho's voice carried from the elevator, followed by rapid Korean that sounded like orders being given. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, and Kemi's pulse quickened as it always did. But tonight, something was different. His usually perfect appearance was disheveled. There was tension in his shoulders, and his eyes held a hardness she'd never seen before. "Thank you for getting him," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "I'm sorry for the short notice." "It's fine, we had fun, didn't we, Jihoon?" The little boy nodded enthusiastically, launching into a recap of their afternoon. But Kemi noticed how Joon-ho's eyes kept darting to his phone, how his jaw remained tight despite his smile. "Jihoon, go wash up for dinner," Joon-ho said in Korean. When they were alone, Kemi studied his face. "Are you okay? You seem." "I'm fine." The words came out sharper than intended. Joon-ho immediately softened his tone. "Work was stressful today. Thank you for taking care of him." "Joon-ho, what exactly do you do?" Kemi asked quietly. "This apartment, Jihoon's school, the way people defer to you." "I told you, import-export." "That's not an answer, that's a deflection." For a moment, Joon-ho looked like he might tell her the truth. But then his phone rang, and she saw him glance at the screen and go completely still. "I have to take this," he said, already moving toward his office. "Make yourself at home." Kemi watched him disappear, noting how he switched to rapid Korean the moment he thought he was out of earshot. The tone was cold, authoritative, completely unlike the gentle man she'd been falling for. She was debating whether to leave when Jihoon reappeared, carrying a photo album. "Want to see pictures of eomma?" he asked, climbing onto the couch beside her. The photos showed a beautiful Korean woman with a gentle smile, often pictured with a much younger Joon-ho who looked softer somehow, less guarded. There were family photos, vacation shots, candid moments of pure happiness. "She was beautiful," Kemi said softly. "Appa says I have her eyes but his stubborn streak." Jihoon turned the page. "This was our house in Seoul. Appa had to leave after eomma died because of his work." "What kind of work did your Appa do in Korea?" Jihoon shrugged. "Important stuff. People were always bowing to him and calling him Hojangnim." Hojangnim, chairman, boss. Kemi's Korean was limited, but she knew that word. And the way Jihoon said it, with casual acceptance of his father's authority over others, sent a chill down her spine. "Jihoon, has your Appa ever?" "I'm sorry about that." Joon-ho's voice cut through her question as he returned, his expression carefully neutral again. "Business never sleeps." "What kind of business requires calls at 9 p.m. that make you look like you want to hurt someone?" The words slipped out before Kemi could stop them. The silence that followed was deafening. Joon-ho's face went completely blank, and Jihoon looked between them with the intuitive worry of a child sensing adult tension. "I think I should go," Kemi said, standing abruptly. "Kemi, wait." "No, it's fine. You clearly have things to handle and I shouldn't have pried." She kissed Jihoon's forehead. "Be good, sweetheart." Joon-ho caught her arm gently as she headed for the elevator. "Please don't go, not like this." "Then tell me the truth, Joon-ho. Because whatever you're involved in, it's bigger than import-export, and I'm starting to feel like I'm falling for a stranger." For a moment, she saw something raw and desperate in his eyes, but then the mask slipped back into place. "Some things are better left unknown," he said quietly. "Trust me on that." "That's exactly the problem," Kemi replied, stepping into the elevator. I don't know if I can trust you at all. As the doors closed between them, Joon-ho pressed his palm against the metal, his carefully constructed world beginning to crumble. Behind him, Ji-hoon's small voice asked the question that would haunt him all night. Appa, is Kemi Noona coming back? Joon-ho stared at his reflection in the elevator doors and wondered if he was about to lose the two best things that had ever happened to him, and if keeping Kemi safe meant letting her go before she discovered the truth about the monster she'd been falling in love with. Vol. The truth came to Kemi in the worst possible way. She'd been avoiding Joon-ho's calls for 3 days, throwing herself into work to avoid thinking about the growing list of red flags. But when Ji-hoon showed up in her ER with his nanny, sporting a fever and asking for Kemi Noona, her resolve crumbled. "Where's your Appa?" she asked, checking his temperature while he clung to her hand. "Important meeting," the nanny, Mrs. Choi, replied in broken English. "He say bring Ji-hoon to you if sick." Kemi's heart melted despite her confusion. Even when they were fighting, Joon-ho trusted her with his son's care. After treating Ji-hoon's minor ear infection and getting him settled in the pediatric ward for observation, she finally returned Joon-ho's frantic calls. "How is he?" His voice was tight with worry. "He's fine, ear infection, but we caught it early. He's sleeping now." "Thank God, I'll be there in 15 minutes. "Joon-ho, you don't have to." "He's my son, Kemi. Of course I'm coming." The line went dead, leaving Kemi staring at her phone and wondering why a simple ear infection required such urgency. Her answer came when Joon-ho arrived with an entourage that made the entire ER go quiet. 6 men in expensive suits flanked him as he strode through the automatic doors, their eyes constantly scanning for threats. The way they moved, the bulges under their jackets, the deference of everyone around them, it painted a picture Kemi didn't want to acknowledge. "Where is he?" Joon-ho demanded, his usual careful English replaced by clipped authority. "Room 314, but Joon-ho, the security." "Stays with me," his tone brooked no argument. "Someone tried to hurt my son once, it won't happen again." As they rode the elevator to the pediatric ward, Kemi studied the men surrounding them. They weren't bodyguards, they were soldiers, and the way they looked at Joon-ho wasn't just respect, it was the kind of loyalty that came from fear and absolute power. Ji-hoon was awake when they entered, his face lighting up. "Appa, Kemi Noona made me feel better." Joon-ho's entire demeanor shifted as he gathered his son into his arms, the dangerous man disappearing behind the worried father. But his security remained posted outside the door, and Kemi noticed how other hospital staff suddenly found reasons to avoid the 3rd floor. "I need to speak with Dr. Adeyemi privately," Joon-ho told Mrs. Choi in Korean. "Stay with Ji-hoon." He led Kemi to an empty conference room. The moment the door closed, she saw the mask slip back into place. "Thank you for taking care of him." "It's my job, Joon-ho, but I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth this time." Her voice was steady despite her racing heart. His jaw tightened. "Kemi, what kind of import-export business requires armed security? What kind of businessman has people bowing and calling him Hojang Nim? And why does everyone in this hospital suddenly look terrified?" Joon-ho was quiet for so long that Kemi thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "There are things about my life that you're better off not knowing. That's not your choice to make. I'm falling in love with you, and I don't even know who you are." The confession hung between them like a live wire. Joon-ho's control cracked, and for a moment, Kemi saw the man behind the mask, vulnerable, desperate, completely in love with her too. "You want the truth?" His voice was rough with emotion. "The truth is I'm the last person you should love. The truth is everything good and innocent about you could be destroyed just by being near me. The truth is I would burn down half of Los Angeles before I let anyone hurt you, and that should terrify you." "Joon-ho, you're scaring me." "Good, you should be scared, because the man you think you're falling in love with doesn't exist. He's a fantasy I created because for the first time in my life, I wanted to be someone worthy of you." Before Kemi could respond, Joon-ho's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his face went deadly calm. "I have to take this." He answered in rapid Korean, his tone shifting to something that made Kemi's blood run cold. Even without understanding the words, she recognized the sound of orders being given. Orders that would have consequences. When he hung up, Joon-ho looked at her with something like grief in his eyes. "I have to go. There's a situation that requires my attention." "What kind of situation?" "The kind that proves everything I just told you." He moved toward the door, then stopped. "Kemi, I need you to promise me something. If anyone ever approaches you asking about me or Jihoon, you call this number immediately." He handed her a card with only a phone number on it. "Don't ask questions. Don't try to handle it yourself. Just call." "What aren't you telling me?" He looked at her for a long moment, memorizing her face like he might never see it again. "I'm telling you that loving me could get you killed, and I'm selfish enough to love you anyway." He left her standing in the conference room, her hands shaking as she stared at the card. It was only later, when she was checking on Jihoon one last time before her shift ended, that she overheard two nurses talking in the hallway. "Did you see the news? That warehouse fire in Koreatown? They're saying it was gang-related." "My cousin works for LAPD. He says it wasn't a fire, it was a message. Someone crossed the Korean mob and they made an example." Kemi's blood turned to ice as pieces clicked into place. The timing of Joon-ho's emergency, the phone call that had made him go cold, the way he'd looked at her like he was saying goodbye. She pulled out her phone and searched for news about the warehouse fire. The reports were vague, but one detail made her sink into the nearest chair. The warehouse had been owned by a company linked to human trafficking, the same kind of men who had tried to take Jihoon. Joon-ho hadn't just left to handle business. He'd left to handle the people who had threatened his son. And the way he'd done it left no doubt about what kind of man she'd been falling in love with. Her phone buzzed with a text. "Jihoon is asking for you. Please don't let my sins keep you from him. He needs you more than I deserve you. JH." Kemi stared at the message, her heart breaking and her world tilting off its axis. Because despite everything, the lies, the danger, the terrifying glimpse into Joon-ho's real world, she was still in love with him. And that scared her more than anything else. 5. The confrontation came at 2 a.m. on a Thursday in the parking garage of Kemi's apartment building. She'd been avoiding Joon-ho's calls for a week, ignoring his texts, throwing herself into work to avoid thinking about the impossible situation she'd found herself in. But she couldn't avoid Jihoon's tearful questions when Mrs. Choi brought him to the hospital for a follow-up appointment. "Why won't you come see me anymore, Kemi Noona? Did I do something wrong?" The heartbreak in his 7-year-old voice had nearly destroyed her. She'd spent the rest of her shift crying in supply closets and questioning every choice she'd made since that night in the alley. Now, as she walked toward her car after another brutal shift, she wasn't surprised to find Joon-ho waiting for her. What surprised her was that he was alone. "No security detail?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. "I sent them away. This conversation is just between us." He looked exhausted, she realized. The perfect composure was cracked, his usually immaculate appearance slightly disheveled. There were shadows under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. "How's Jihoon?" Heartbroken, he doesn't understand why the person he's come to love as a mother figure has suddenly disappeared from his life. The words hit like a physical blow. "That's not fair." "None of this is fair, Kemi, but it's the reality we're living in." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them. "I know what you did," she said finally. "The warehouse, the men who tried to take Jihoon." Joon-ho's expression didn't change. "And what do you think I did?" "I think you made sure they could never hurt anyone again. I think you used methods that would horrify me if I knew the details. And I think you did it because someone threatened your son. Does that change how you see me? Kemi had been asking herself the same question for days. I don't know. The rational part of me says I should run as far and as fast as I can, that getting involved with you is dangerous and stupid and could destroy everything I've worked for. And the irrational part? The irrational part understands why you did it. The irrational part has seen how you are with Jihoon, how you've been with me. The irrational part knows that despite everything you've done, you're not a monster. Joon-ho stepped closer, and she could see the desperate hope in his eyes. I never wanted you to be part of this world. I tried to keep you separate, to protect you from the truth. By lying to me. By loving you enough to want to be better than I am. The simple honesty of it broke something open in Kemi's chest. Joon-ho, I need to understand. What exactly are you asking of me? I'm asking you to choose. His voice was raw. Choose to walk away, and I'll make sure you're never bothered by my world again. You can go back to your quiet life, your safe job, your predictable future. He paused, his dark eyes holding hers. Or choose to stay, knowing that it means accepting all of me, the parts you love and the parts that terrify you. If I stay, what does that mean? What does my life look like? It means you'll always be protected, but never completely safe. It means you'll be part of a world where violence is sometimes necessary and justice doesn't always come from the law. It means loving a man who has blood on his hands but would spill more to keep you and Jihoon safe. And if someone comes after me because of you? Joon-ho's eyes went deadly cold. Then they'll learn why crossing my family is the last mistake they ever make. The possessive certainty in his voice should have terrified her. Instead, it sent a shiver of something else entirely down her spine. I need guarantees, she said finally. If I do this, if I choose you, I need to know that you'll never lie to me again. No more half-truths. No more protecting me from reality. If I'm going to be part of your world, I need to know what that world looks like. Done. And Jihoon's safety comes first. Always. Before your business, before your pride, before everything. It already does. And you have to promise me that you'll try to find a way out. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday. I won't ask you to abandon everything overnight, but I need to know you want something better for Jihoon's future. Joon-ho was quiet for a long moment. That's the hardest promise you could ask for. But will you make it? For me, for him? I'll try. Kemi studied his face, seeing the truth in his eyes. This man who commanded fear and respect from dangerous people was laying his heart bare for her, offering her everything he had and asking for the impossible in return. Okay, she whispered. Okay, I choose you. I choose this insane, dangerous, impossible situation because I love you and I love that little boy, and I can't imagine my life without either of you in it. The relief that crossed Joon-ho's face was so profound it took her breath away. He crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, cupping her face in his hands. Are you sure? Because once you're mine, Kemi, I'll never let you go. I'll protect you with everything I have, but I'll also never be able to let you walk away. Then don't let me go, she whispered against his lips. Keep me safe and let me love you the way you deserve to be loved. When he kissed her, it was with the desperate passion of a man who'd thought he'd lost everything and found it again. It was a promise and a claim and a prayer all at once. I love you, he murmured against her lips. I love you so much it scares me. Good, Kemi replied, echoing his words from weeks ago. You should be scared, because I'm about to turn your carefully controlled world upside down. As they held each other in the dim light of the parking garage, both of them knew they were crossing a line they could never uncross. But for the first time since Ma Young's death, Joon-ho felt hope for the future. And for the first time in her life, Kemi felt like she was exactly where she belonged. 8 months later. Eomma, you're burning the hotiok again. Kemi laughed as Jihoon's voice carried from the kitchen of their new home, a sprawling house in the Pacific Palisades that was both fortress and sanctuary. She'd insisted on cooking breakfast herself despite Joon-ho's offers to hire a chef, and her attempts at Korean street food was still hit or miss. "I heard that, young man," she called back, flipping the slightly too brown pancake with more enthusiasm than skill. Strong arms wrapped around her waist from behind, and she melted into Joon-ho's embrace as he pressed a kiss to her neck. "He's not wrong," he murmured, reaching around her to adjust the heat, "but I love that you try. Your son has no respect for his new mother's learning curve. My son adores his new mother, even if she does burn breakfast." Kemi turned in his arms, studying the face that had become more precious to her than breathing. The dangerous edge was still there, would always be there, but it was tempered now by something softer. Love had changed them both. "Any word on the territory negotiations?" she asked quietly. Joon-ho's expression tightened slightly. "Settled. The families have agreed to the new divisions. There shouldn't be any more conflicts." It had taken months, but Joon-ho was slowly transitioning his organization toward more legitimate enterprises. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't fast, but he was keeping his promise to find a way out for Ji-hoon's future, for their future. "Good," Kemi said, "because I have news." Something in her tone made Joon-ho go very still. "What kind of news?" Kemi smiled, pulling the pregnancy test from her pocket. "The kind that means you're going to need to baby-proof this house all over again." For a moment, Joon-ho just stared at the test, his face cycling through shock, joy, and terror in rapid succession. "You're pregnant." "We are pregnant. But we've only been married for 3 months. Apparently, your swimmers are very determined." Joon-ho lifted her off her feet, spinning her around the kitchen as she laughed. When he set her down, his eyes were suspiciously bright. "A baby," he whispered, his hand coming to rest on her still flat stomach. "Our baby. Are you happy?" "Happy doesn't begin to cover it." He kissed her softly, reverently. "I love you, Mrs. Park." "I love you too, Mr. Park." "Eomma, the hotteok are definitely burning now." They broke apart, laughing, rushing to save breakfast, while Ji-hoon supervised from his perch on the counter. As Kemi watched Joon-ho help his son flip pancakes, teaching him the proper technique with infinite patience, she marveled at the life they'd built together. It wasn't the safe, predictable future she'd once imagined for herself. There were still security protocols, still late-night phone calls, still moments when the dangerous reality of Joon-ho's world intruded on their domestic bliss. But it was theirs. "When will you tell Ji-hoon about the baby?" Joon-ho asked as they sat down to breakfast. "Soon. I want to make sure everything's okay first." "Everything will be perfect," Ji-hoon announced confidently, apparently having overheard despite their whispered conversation. "Because angel ladies make the best eommas. And the best eommas make the best Barbies." Kemi and Joon-ho exchanged amused glances over his head. "How did you?" "I'm 8, not deaf," Ji-hoon said with the dignity of someone much older. "Plus, you've been putting your hand on your tummy and smiling the same way Eomma used to before she told me about the baby that never came." The casual reference to Ma Young's miscarriage, something Kemi hadn't known about, made her heart clench. But Ji-hoon seemed at peace with it, secure in the love of his new family. "Are you okay with having a little brother or sister?" she asked gently. "Are you kidding? I've been asking Appa for a sibling forever." He paused, considering. "But they have to learn Korean and English and how to make proper kimchi. It's important for the family business." "What family business?" Kemi asked, raising an eyebrow at Joon-ho. "The restaurant chain we're opening," Joon-ho replied smoothly. "Completely legitimate, I promise." "Uh-huh, and what exactly will these restaurants serve?" "The best Korean African fusion in Los Angeles," Ji-hoon announced proudly. "Appa says we're going to combine eomma Ma Young's recipes with your grandmother's recipes and make something completely new." Kemi felt tears prick her eyes. It was such a perfect metaphor for their life together, taking the best parts of their different worlds and creating something beautiful and new. "I think that sounds perfect," she said, reaching across the table to take both their hands. As they sat there in their sun-drenched kitchen, planning their future over burnt hotteok and fresh orange juice, Kemi reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She'd saved a child she didn't know, only to discover he belonged to the most dangerous man in Los Angeles. But in saving Jaehoon, she'd also saved herself. And maybe, just maybe, she'd saved Joon-ho too. Love, she'd learned, wasn't always safe or predictable or easy. Sometimes it was dangerous and complicated and required more courage than you thought you possessed. But when it was real, when it was the kind of love that transformed you into someone better than you were before, it was worth every risk. "I love our family," she said softly. "So do I," Joon-ho replied, bringing her hand to his lips. "So do I." Outside, the city of Los Angeles stretched out before them, full of possibilities and new beginnings. And in their kitchen, surrounded by the laughter of the child who'd brought them together and the promise of the child they'd created, Kemi knew she'd made the right choice. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you could do was fall in love. But sometimes it was also the most necessary. And that's where we leave Kemi and Joon-ho's story for now. If you enjoyed this tale of courage, redemption, and dangerous love, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories that will grip your heart. Drop a comment below and tell me, would you have made the same choice as Kemi? Could you love someone with such a dark past? Let's talk about it. And if you want to see what happens next in their journey, maybe the challenges of raising a family in two worlds, or what happens when old enemies resurface, let me know. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.